Ballots continue to be counted on this day after Election Day. We are staying on top of several races. In the race to become mayor of Seattle, incumbent Mayor Bruce Harrell still leads challenger Katie Wilson, the lead now growing by 11,000 votes. Voters in Tacoma and Everett are also deciding on mayoral races. First, Tacoma, Anders Ibsen is leading by 8% of the vote to John Hines, 55% to 45%. In Everett, Scott Murphy is trailing by about 5% of the vote to incumbent Cassie Franklin. She's ahead by more than 500 votes right now. We are expecting another ballot drop from Pierce and Snohomish counties at 5 o'clock. We'll see if the numbers change. Nationwide, Democrats won big in several races last night. In New York City, 34-year-old self-proclaimed socialist Zohran Mamdani was elected, soundly defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Mamdani made history as the first Muslim and South Asian mayor of New York City. Democrat Maggie Sherrill was elected governor of New Jersey, and in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger became the first woman to be named governor of that state. President Trump spoke about the results during a breakfast with Senate Republicans.
If you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans. And that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor.
In California, voters changed the state's congressional map in an attempt to pick up more seats for Democrats. The move is designed to counter GOP redistricting efforts in other states like Texas. KOMO News political analyst Ron Dotzauer is back to discuss the initial election results. Good to see you, Ron.
You bet. It's good to be back.
I know you have been anxiously awaiting the new ballot drop to see how things shake out. Let's begin with the race for Seattle mayor, Ron. Incumbent Mayor Harrell ahead of challenger Katie Wilson by several points now. What are your first thoughts when looking at the results?
Well, two quick things. Number one, it validates something I'd said yesterday, which was I thought he closed out his campaign very strong. He was picking up momentum, and he seemed to really execute a very good strategic plan, particularly in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so these later ballots that are being counted seem to reflect that. And so that's number one. Number two, that the bow wave pushback from the progressive that people have anticipated in this race hasn't happened. And with the lead going from a 6-point spread to what now, 9-point spread, 11,000. In the whole county, there's only about 100,000 ballots left. He's in a really strong position to finish thing out. And then probably by this time tomorrow afternoon, I think we'll be pretty close to determining who this winner is.
They do release new numbers every day tomorrow. So even with the ballots to be counted still, do you think there's not much ground Wilson can cover now?
Well, yeah, she needed to get some pickup right here on this next count, right? She needed to tighten it or maintain it. And either one of those things happened. She actually lost ground with the second round of ballots. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult for her to try to make up that ground in the next round or two. It really will be very challenging. I think she's probably disappointed that she didn't close the gap on this second round.
I'd like to ask you about a couple of city races in Seattle where the incumbents are not doing well. Now, we're talking about Seattle City Council President Sarah Nelson. City Attorney Ann Davison appear to be losing their jobs tonight to new challengers Erica Evans for City Attorney and Dion Foster for City Council Position 9. How are you receiving those results? Because we didn't see that flip happen that dramatically in the mayoral race, not so for these two races.
Yeah, because it's tougher for races like this to have much of a profile. Now, I think in the city attorney's races, they were clearly defining that race as a Democrat versus a Republican, and the Democrat prevailed. In the Sarah Nelson situation, that's a bit of a head scratcher. She came in, 4 years ago with Mayor Harrell and represented sort of a moderate centrist position. And to lose as bad as she is seemingly is lost makes me sort of wonder how the bottom fell out on that for her. I noticed that the amount of money spent was pretty even, so nobody had any decided advantage on the money. So I can only surmise that she probably got out hustled on the ground.
What does this mean for leadership at Seattle City Hall? Now we have potentially two new people, both leaning towards progressive, really shaking things up as far as the centrist hold that had been at City Hall. What does this mean for Mayor Harrell if he continues on to a second term? Can they get things done? What are your concerns, if any?
Well, what happens, I think, because he's been a council member, he's been a mayor. I think this puts even more power, if you will, in the mayor's office to have, incoming, quote unquote, freshman council members. Okay. And so it means that the executive branch will have a much more of a strengthening position when it comes to policy matters. As far as the moderate to left of center, yes, that will be reflected in some of their, their policy work on the committees. But at the end of the day, I think the winner here is probably the mayor.
All right, Ron Dotzauer with Strategies 360. We always appreciate your analysis, Ron. Thank you very much.
You betcha.
There was one statewide measure on the ballot this year, SJR 8201. It would allow the state to invest money from the long-term care fund into private companies, with 100% of the returns going back into the fund. The latest numbers show the measure passing 57% to 43%. In Snohomish County, Edmonds Prop 1 failed by a large margin last night. Supporters said the $14 million levy lift would prevent budget cuts. Opponents say the city needs to come up with a more affordable alternative plan. Be sure to stick with KOMO for continuing coverage of the general election. When we're not on the air, remember you can get the full list of results on our website. Just go to KOMOnews.com.